This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Philadelphia to Erie and from Scranton to Pittsburgh. It's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow of the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy, and I'm joined as usual by my co-host, Mara Donnelly. Mara, it's been a little bit since we've been together, and much has happened. And certainly one of the most notable things is one of the great giants of American politics, former Vice President Dick Cheney, has passed.
Yes, that was very sad news.
Yeah, it was he's been through so many health issues. I thought this, he'd be
invincible.
Around. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And someone who can tell us all about Dick Cheney, as well as what's been happening in Pennsylvania politics since the last time we've been together. We're fortunate enough to have with us Charles McNamee. Charlie is the founding editor of Real Clear Pennsylvania. He's a contributing writer for Real Clear Politics and for City Journal. You have quite a resume that you've built in a very short period of time, Charles.
Thank you. Yes, it's honor to write for those publications. Yeah.
Keeps you busy.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Well, tell us about a little bit, if you wouldn't mind, about Dick Cheney and his effect on American politics, because I believe I read quite a very interesting line from one of your essays that you thought that he might be the founder of modern-day American populism.
Yeah, I mean, if you think back to the realignment that occurred during the Trump era, and even here in Pennsylvania, what has occurred among voters in both parties, it all goes back to the Bush era. And a forgotten footnote of, let's say, the Trump decade is that when Trump prevailed in the 2016 primary, it was driven in large part by what he was saying then, which was he was a repudiation of the Bush era. And he railed against Bush and Cheney, and that resonated among working class voters in historically democratic regions of the state. So Cheney's impact is influential twofold in a generational sense. Millennials, they were living in their formative years then. So they have memories of the Iraq War in middle school and high school. And let's say by the 2006 election, if they were first-time voters, they were voting Democrat over the Iraq War. And that in turn led to enthusiasm for Obama. Likewise, with the boomers, let's say in Cambria County or Luzerne County, they didn't like the Bush era either, and they vote for Obama. So many of those Obama to Trump voters, and Pennsylvania is really home to them, were driven in large part by their distaste for the Bush era and their dislike of Cheney. I mean, he had a storied career going back to Nixon, but it's indisputable that he had a profound impact in terms of electoral politics and where we are today.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, he is the Deputy Chief of Staff, then the Chief of Staff for President Ford, and then for President Bush Sr. He is the Secretary of Defense, and then he becomes the Vice President for his son, President Bush. That's a long record, isn't it?
Dramatic CV, yes.
He was an amazing man. Yeah. Well, why don't we focus a little bit now on what happened in Pennsylvania on Election Day? I love your just overall perspective on it because I've got a couple specific questions, as I know Charlie will, on it. So, what happened?
Oh, what happened? The Republicans got crushed. I mean, it was a total down ballot referendum, and then, of course, makes one wonder how could things go so poorly for the GOP just when a year ago things went so well for the Republican Party here in Pennsylvania and fueled Trump's presidential victory. And it's a reminder that the infrastructure of the Republican Party in Pennsylvania doesn't seem to really be there. And Democrats, for example, outspent Republicans 4-1 in the state judicial races. Turnout was abysmal. And when you look at the turnout and who showed up and the issues, it appears that the party is focused on, let's say, a map of Pennsylvania that no longer exists, and on issues that are really more in the, let's say, alignment with 2016 or even 2020 than now. So, for example, the judicial races, they ran on COVID. I think people want to forget about COVID at this point. 2016, those working class, realigned, blue-collar Democrat voters, now voting Republican or are Republican, they're here, but the state has demographically transformed even in the past decade. So I think a challenge for the party is acknowledging the map as it is today and the issues that resonate, and similar to Democrats last year, denying the reality of now, that is, there is economic discontent, and it's felt among working class voters in the state, which we saw Republican voters vote Democrat down ballot this time, but also Democrats, let's say, living in, or independent voters living in suburban Philadelphia, where the life sciences industry is a major sector, that just got gutted by NIH funding. There are mass layoffs. It's a major sector. So I think it was a referendum, and you saw crazy results like Hampton Township of Cumberland County, which was synonymous with the Republican Party, and went down.
Oh. I have a question for you. I've been dying to know the answer to this. Maybe you already do, but I don't. Why does everyone keep saying that until the Republicans embrace early voting, they're going to have a problem? Why are the Democrats so much better at mailing in a ballot than the Republicans are?
You know, I think that there's more to the Republican Party's challenge. So it's early voting,
yeah.
right? But early voting, but also acknowledging the demographics of the state now, not the demographics of the state even in 2016 or 2020. So targeting, let's say, minority voters in the state, that you have Hispanic majority plurality cities that did so well for Trump in 2024. I mean, every ward in the city of Hazleton, 70% Dominican went for Trump. Mm-hmm. And Luzerne County Council just went Dem this time, after flipping Republican in 21. The South Asian population in the greater Harrisburg area, I mean, it's transformative in Cumberland County, for example. Looking at the map as it is now, and then early voting, it's a challenge, but I think that the challenge transcends that process, and it's more understanding the acuity of the discontent among voters who are, let's say, maybe younger in certain regions of the state, or they're transient. They're not. They may be immigrants. They may be second generation. The state is changing.
Well, we need to ask you, you need to be our genie. We need someone to help us understand and explain the mystery of Senator Fetterman and Governor Shapiro, and perhaps their future, their interaction. Senator Fetterman just released a new biography of himself, mm-hmm. and it's quite gripping in many areas. I don't even know where to start. What is his future going to be in Pennsylvania politics, Charlie?
Yes, his memoir, I mean, it's a candid reflection on his grappling with depression. I mean, it's a very personal memoir, and going back to his childhood in New York. His future, well, again, I mean, he has a base. It's a heterodox base, right? That there are, let's say, Republicans who, perhaps older ones especially, who admire many of his positions and his willingness to break with the Democratic Party. But keep in mind, he still votes Democrat 91% of the time. I mean, but he does break in the sense of voting to reopen for the federal government, for example. He has a great bipartisan relationship with Senator McCormick. His relationship with Governor Shapiro is virtually non-existent for various reasons, but
the biography was saying they haven't spoken for over a year.
Right. So, but Fetterman's future is dependent upon what the electorate looks like these next few cycles. So there may be Zoomer voters, for example, who may not like him for his position on Israel, for example. But then there are Boomer Republicans who like Fetterman for that very same position. Yeah. So there's a generational gap, and it's really, I would say that it's a bit of a fog right now, but his willingness to break with the party, I think, plays well in a state like Pennsylvania, where you had plenty of people who voted for Trump last year who voted Democrat down ballot this year. People are still willing to be wide-ranging in their voting patterns.
When he doesn't just break with the Democrats, he's not afraid to be out there when he does it either. You know, he's on talk shows, he's doing interviews, he's really fearless when it comes to what his positions are. I think I personally feel that's refreshing.
No, it is. I mean, the one issue where I'm curious where he stands is AI and tech, because it's going to transform the state, and people aren't loving it. So, and there's a lot of uncertainty. So,
Yeah.
Amazon Fulfillment Services, for example, such a huge employer in so many counties of the state. What is automation going to look like? There are already mass layoffs at Amazon. The data center proliferation, so many are slated. The level of opposition to data centers in Republican regions, I have never seen such visceral opposition to a proposed form of economic development in years. And they're all MAGA voters. And you have, let's say, Governor Shapiro, Republicans, a bipartisan push for them, but voters on the ground are opposed to them. So the very same voters who punished, let's say, both parties over globalization, offshoring in the early to mid-2000s, will they punish, let's say, candidates of either party over the domestic forms of economic development that are either not creating as many jobs as one would think or are leading to mass layoffs? So Fetterman has been quiet on this issue, and it would be interesting to hear his take.
We'll have to ask him. Let's get him on.
Yeah.
Yeah, we only have a few minutes left, Charlie, but let me ask you, what is the future of Pennsylvania politics? Is it Josh Shapiro, or is Josh Shapiro going to
Outta
be
here.
completely committed to running for the presidency and on his way to Washington? Or is he, and if so, who are the up-and-coming stars in Harrisburg who will be replacing the current cast?
So Shapiro, I mean, he comes out with his memoir in January, which is
Interesting timing.
part of the process for what will be likely a presidential announcement for run for president at some point.
We're looking for yours soon.
Oh no, never. But it's but he. Yeah, the future is tough because, I mean, you asked about the bench. I'm not going to name names on that because I think there's a challenge for both parties to find people who are compelling and relate and talk authentically to Pennsylvania voters, who speak to their concerns. And the future is dependent on a candidate who understands Pennsylvania as it is now, what it's going to look like in the next decade. It has changed more, let's say, in the past 10 to 15 years than it did in the previous half century. But there are still problems. Like, all this change is occurring when the average community in Pennsylvania has 19th century housing stock and affordability issues and let's say housing stock issues due to the age. And it's an increasingly suburban state. I mean, we just see this in the Harrisburg area, how much it has changed. I mean, Cumberland County is booming. Hershey is booming. By acknowledging the increasing suburbanization, that's not changing, that the voting segments will get younger and more engaged. And there's so much anger out there that I think there's a large segment of the Pennsylvania electorate that isn't beholden to either party. They hold both parties in contempt, and they're willing to vote for either party if they find a candidate who compellingly speaks to their concerns. And, I mean, this transcends Pennsylvania. I bet if you did the analysis, there are plenty of Trump to Mamdani voters in New York City. That's the level of discontent.
Charlie, we have just begun
You gotta have him back.
Yeah.
You have to come back very, very
Yeah.
soon, because we've just beginning to open the lid here and look inside of Pennsylvania politics with you and get your interpretation of it, and it's fascinating. Would you please come back very soon
I'd
and
love to come back. Yes.
tell us what to expect in the near future? We'll be back with the next segment of Behind the Headlines right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. Maura and I in this segment are joined by Bob Latham. Bob is the Executive Vice President of the Associated Pennsylvania Constructors, and you've been a frequent guest of ours, and you keep us up to date on Pennsylvania road conditions. And we have quite a lot of new news breaking right now. We have a state budget. We're the last state in the union to have a state budget, but we have one. What does that state budget have to tell us about construction and about roads?
So in the transportation space, the bottom line is transportation funding and issues, both public transit and highways, was left behind this year. So we're disappointed about that. On the positive side, the people that we most represent, and those are vendors and contractors with the state, payments were being withheld because of the lack of budget authority to pay contractors. So millions of dollars were being withheld. Those will start to flow now, so that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. The vendors and contractors that did work for the state will now get paid. So that's the positive side of it. But you recall, I think the last time I was here, we talked about a potential of a deal that would fund public transit primarily in the southeast, as well as local and rural roads throughout the Commonwealth.
Absolutely.
Not just in other areas, but also across the Commonwealth. Roads that were ineligible for federal funds. We had a schematic there where they would get be part of that funding deal, I guess, if you will, which involved some gambling revenue and some other things. That all fell apart as part of the budget. It didn't happen. The other thing that we've talked about for many years here on this is the fact that a lot of money that people pay in gas taxes and registration fees and things that ostensibly are supposed to go for road improvements and road maintenance, we're going over to the general fund to pay for the state police. There was an agreement to step down that money down to zero at one point. The governor had $50 million in his original budget this year to go back to road construction and maintenance. That did not even occur in this budget. So we're very, very disappointed in that as well, because that's something that had been ongoing for a number of years, since 2018.
Right, and every year had it been stepped down every year.
Yes, I mean, it got to a high under the Wolf administration of $800 million a year. We were all the way down to $250. We had a glide path to zero, and we kind of hit a bump here in this budget, which we don't understand why, but that's where we are. So payments are moving forward, but as far as addressing our long-term highway and transit needs, it did not happen in this budget, and because it didn't happen in this budget didn't mean it's going to go away. Yeah. So it continues to be, and the need continues. On the transit side, for example, they were basically forced to go back and take money that was supposed to go to capital improvements, new buses, new train stations, bus stations, and things like that. Take that money out and use it for operating. That's not going to last. That's not sustainable. On the highway side, we continue to have rampant inflation. Well, we have higher costs now over the last 5 years. It's tempered somewhat, but we still have higher costs in materials and labor. Not addressing the needs for additional funding there doesn't make that issue go away. In fact, I think that the statistics will show that PennDOT is projecting that roads will continue to get worse and worse starting next year if we don't find ways to fund more improvements. So that's going to be a problem. We've addressed a lot of our bridge needs over the last 10 years because of a major funding bill we passed in 2013, but that's going to start to swing back up too. So, we've got a canary in the coal mine right now, and it wasn't addressed, and it needs to be.
So I want to make sure our viewers understand, when Pennsylvania gets federal funding for state highway projects, that does not and cannot go to local roads, correct?
There are a number of local roads that are ineligible for that.
Okay.
You're correct. We
So
have
this deal you were working on would have
That-
focused on
on-
local roads?
Exactly. Mostly in the more rural areas, but there are some ineligible roads in counties like Montgomery County and others. It's not just, out in what we would
Right.
call the hinterland. But so what's happened is you will see next year a continuation of major projects that were funded by that federal bill from 5 years ago. So big jobs are going to continue. I-95 in Philadelphia. In the Harrisburg area next year, we will see the bids open on a replacement of the I-83 River Bridge across the Susquehanna River. There are some other major projects in Lehigh County as well. But those big jobs are consuming, because Pennsylvania has to match that federal money. The money that we have available at the state level is going to match that, and that leaves nothing for some of these rural paving projects, and those needs continue to be unmet.
So Bob, what are you going to do about all this?
Well, we still have a plan. The one thing is, even though the budget has passed and none of this was included in that, we still have a short-term plan that will fund money for those rural bridges and roads. It's a borrowing plan. We are proposing to inject about $600 million back into the program, and just for context, right now we're bidding about $3 billion worth of work over in the course of each year, and the lion's share of that's going into a small number of these big projects. So that would raise the program by just about 10%, which isn't a huge amount, but it would mean a lot to some of those rural bridges, and it would be a short-term fix until we can get around to again finding a major transportation bill that would address all modes of transportation, public transit, local governments have needs, aviation, and other modes like ports and airports and so on and so forth, which is what we did about 15 years ago.
What's the approval process for this borrowing plan that you have?
The General Assembly has to pass a bill to authorize the Department of
And
Transportation.
that can happen outside of the budget?
That does not have to go with the budget.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're actually hoping to get started on that even as we speak.
Oh, that's great, okay.
So-
Yeah.
Well, we've seen inflation, of course, cut into road construction and our plans, but most of the public doesn't realize how the precipitous drop in asphalt that's been laid across the state. Could you mention that briefly? and
Sure.
what we're going to do about that, Bob?
Sure. Well, that's this program that we're hoping with on the short term. You're right. We've seen about a 40% drop in the amount of paving that's been done, or asphalt paving that's been done. Some of this lesser, less effective, really short-term things like oil and chip and all that's been done, but we're not seeing the level of asphalt paving that we've done in the past, and we think that this bonding program would be helpful in being able to move forward some of those projects that will last a lot longer in the long run.
And that asphalt decline is totally related to the cost of asphalt, right? Or is it
Well,
project related?
it's
too?
more project related.
Oh, okay.
It's more the fact that we've had to shift our state monies over to match these big federal jobs,
okay.
and so those paving projects can't be funded because as a result of that. Again, those projects are needed, and construction is much more costly today than it used to be in the past, and that's just a fact of life. So some of these projects that were $20-30 million 5-6 years ago, they're now like $50-60 million. So, and that has a compounding effect on the inability to do some of the smaller work.
Well, in the last 35 seconds or 40 seconds that are left to us, What about your relationship with the state police? How's that going to be working out in the long term?
Well, give credit to Governor Shapiro. The first year that he was in, he created this fund in the general fund that would pay for the state police, and that would allow the freeing up of the money coming back to the motor license fund. Unfortunately, that stopped this year, so we need to restart that. Again, it doesn't impact state police funding. They need to be fully funded. They're vitally important to the Commonwealth. What we're proposing here would not impact their budget.
And Bob, we want to thank you very much for being with us today, and we look forward to being with all of you again next week on another edition of Behind the Headlines. We'll see you then.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.